I thought he was going to quit that day. It seemed like the end of the road for him. But instead, he made a decision that changed everything, not just for himself, but for an entire community. This is the story of Samuel, a quiet dreamer who built a future out of nothing. And trust me, it's a story you'll never forget.
Samuel wasn't the kind of guy you'd notice right away. He was quiet, always in the background, but you could tell there was something different about him. He didn't have much. Not the clothes, not the gadgets, not the connections. But Samuel had one thing that most people didn't: grit. He grew up in our neighborhood, the kind of place where opportunities were rare and dreams didn't often come true. Samuel's family struggled. His mom sold Puff Puff by the roadside, and his dad worked as a mechanic. Together, they barely made enough to feed 4 kids. Their one-room apartment had cracks in the walls, and during the rainy season, water poured through the roof. I remember walking past their house one day and seeing buckets everywhere, catching water. It was hard not to feel sorry for them, but Samuel didn't want pity. He wanted more. He told anyone who would listen that he was going to be a software engineer. Most people laughed. How could a guy who didn't even own a laptop get into tech? I first met Samuel at a free tech workshop in town. It was one of those programs where they teach the basics of coding. Most of us came prepared. Laptops, notebooks, even tablets. But Samuel? He showed up with a torn notebook and a pen so short it looked like he'd been using it for years. At first, I didn't pay him much attention, but then I noticed something. While most people were distracted, chatting or scrolling on their phones, Samuel was laser-focused. He wrote down everything the instructor said, even the stuff that didn't make sense to him. One day, after the workshop, I saw him sitting outside on the curb. He looked defeated. His notebook was open on his lap, and his pen hung loosely in his hand. I asked him what was wrong, and he let out a deep sigh. "I don't have a laptop," he said. "How am I supposed to practice? How do I even keep up with everyone else?" I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him to let it go, to focus on something more practical. And I did say something like that. "You know, Samuel, it's okay if tech isn't your thing. Not everyone can do it." He looked up at me with tired eyes and said, "If I leave this, what else will I do?" I don't have a backup plan. That moment stuck with me. Samuel wasn't just chasing a dream, he was holding on to the only hope he had. A week later, I heard that Samuel had borrowed a laptop from someone at his church. When I saw it, I couldn't believe it. The thing was ancient. It made this loud whirring sound every time he turned it on, and it took 5 minutes just to open a browser. But Samuel didn't care. He spent hours teaching himself HTML and CSS, watching YouTube tutorials on his borrowed laptop. Here's the thing about Samuel. He didn't let anything stop him. When he couldn't afford data, he'd walk miles to the nearest cyber cafe and sit outside, using their free Wi-Fi. Sometimes I'd see him there, sitting on the curb with his laptop on his knees, typing away. He started small. His first project was a website for his mom's Puff Puff business. It wasn't anything fancy, just a basic page with her contact info and a few pictures. But people in the neighborhood noticed. Soon, small businesses started asking him to make websites for them too. Then came the turning point. Samuel heard about an online coding competition. The prize was a fully funded spot at a tech boot camp in Lagos. The catch? You had to submit a working app. Samuel didn't know how to build an app. He barely understood the requirements, but he wasn't going to let that stop him. For weeks, he stayed up late, working by candlelight when their electricity went out. He watched tutorial after tutorial, trying to piece together how to build something that worked. I remember seeing him one night. It was almost midnight, and he was sitting outside, his face lit by the dim glow of his laptop screen. His eyes were red, and he looked exhausted. I asked him why he was pushing himself so hard, and he said, "If I don't do this, who will? I can't let this chance slip away." When he finally submitted his app, a simple tool to help market women track their sales, he was nervous. "It's not perfect," he said, "but it's the best I can do." Weeks went by without any news. Samuel started to doubt himself. I could see it in the way he walked, shoulders slumped, eyes downcast. Then, one day, he got an email. He'd won. The boot camp in Lagos changed everything for Samuel. For the first time, he had access to proper training, mentors, and even a brand new laptop. He soaked up every bit of knowledge like a sponge. By the end of the program, he was already getting offers for internships. Samuel didn't stop there. He landed a remote job with a tech company in Europe. Within a year, he was earning in dollars, more money than anyone in our neighborhood had ever seen. He used his first paycheck to fix his parents' house. Then he built them a new one. He paid off all their debts and sent his siblings to school. Today, Samuel runs a free coding club for kids in our neighborhood. He's teaching the next generation of dreamers, kids who look at him and think, "If Samuel can do it, maybe I can too." Whenever I see Samuel now, he always says the same thing: "If I could do it, anyone can." But honestly, I don't think just anyone could be like Samuel. Most people would have given up. Most people wouldn't have walked miles for Wi-Fi or stayed up all night working on a broken laptop. Samuel wasn't just chasing a dream, he was building a future out of nothing. And he didn't just change his life, he changed the lives of everyone around him. If you ever think you can't do something, remember Samuel. Remember the guy who turned nothing into everything. If he could do it, maybe you can too.